Pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much
Thanks for having me.
for giving us the opportunity to speak on this. I know you're super passionate about supply chain and data analytics within that as well. In terms of Rachel, for anyone that's listening, really, Rachel has operated up to a senior level within global businesses such as Siemens and Smith and Nephew, Coca-Cola, and holds a real passion for data-driven supply chain. Great. Okay. Well, yeah, I thought we'd certainly offer a few different areas really that we can look at really. So, just to kick things off, I mean, how did you get interested in supply chain in the first place?
Oh, well, that was about the very start of my career, really. So I was about 23, I think, and I joined Unilever. And I actually joined as a demand planner. So as part of that sort of supply chain, if that plan source, make, deliver and enable, I got into plan and I just loved it. And what a great place to start. Sort of Unilever, even at that stage, I think were always sort of the best of the best. And I was really lucky to step into really into supply chain and into data and into planning at the stage when it was really just taking off, because we were just globalizing. We were also just getting machines, computers that could actually do things more quickly. So I remember the days of having two computers on my desk, and you would turn them on. 45 minutes later, you'd come back with a bacon and cheese sandwich, and they just about would have started up. So that's where I began.
Amazing. Okay, well, and you've obviously worked in lots of different global organisations as well since then, and some major brands as well as some smaller companies as well. But how have you seen it kind of evolved over the years? Is there a lot of difference now, and I guess is there a lot of priority put on things now compared to when it first started for you?
Oh, hugely. I mean, of course, we've transformed light years in the last couple of decades. Computing speeds have got faster. Access to bigger and bigger data has just occurred, and the tools, the visualization tools, so we can see what that data looks like, is transforming as we speak. And for me, personally, one of those areas that I'm seeing some of the most excitement and applicability into all of those worlds that I've watched change and transform, it really is that ability to first of all look at data instead of in very siloed ways, and also in very flat and sort of linear ways, is to look at knowledge graphs, and we start looking at how we look at sort of how data relates to other data, and actually giving that to human beings in supply chains. It's incredible what people can do with information when they get to see the critical relationships between things. It's often knowledge that's in their heads, and it's often knowledge that now we can actually bring out in data. And when we can do that, we give them a foundation to just transform what they can contribute to business. That's what I've really, really, really seen. I wish I'd had some of that way back when. It would have been amazing what we could have done. But now it's a really exciting future.
Yeah. Have you always had a keen focus on the more data-driven elements of supply chain?
I think so, but I think it was more because I was just passionate about numbers and patterns. And I think that's what really drew me, and to be honest, it just made me love what I did as my job in supply chains, because supply chain management is so much about pattern recognition, seeing where the variation is, what is coming out of tune or out of sequence, or coming out of control inside the supply chain. Where are things starting that are new? Where are things stopping that you didn't expect to stop? Where are those signals in my supply chain, and how are they changing, and how do I detect them? And so that to me was all about sort of pattern recognition. So as a planner, even when I started, it was all about looking at the forecasting data and looking for patterns, and then trying to understand why were these things happening? What were all of the root causes? And so I think that it's been really healthy over time that passion's been driven by I'm really interested in data, because it helps me see things inside of my world. Because our supply chains are fundamentally driven by the enable portion of information flow. And when you can see it, you start to be able to add so much more value. And when you can do something with it, you start feeling valuable and you start really getting engaged into, actually, I can make a difference to this supply chain. So that's probably why I think I'm data driven, because it helps me do so much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you, so where did you first see an organisation, I guess, recognise the importance of good quality data? Was it your first role, or was it further down?
Yeah, well, I think actually there were two really strong memories that I've got of where that really hit home. One was Unilever, because I just kept on recognizing the more and more and more I was with Unilever. So I was with Unilever for 10 years, and I went through really the foundation of my supply chain career with Unilever, you know, going from planning all the way through into sort of factory logistics, all the way through into network, supply chain network design, and then all the way through as well, including, you know, sort of the customer service portion, but then also the very broad sort of global and regional sort of planning cycles. And I think with all of that, I noticed that Unilever had really had an ethos of data-driven insights, of a data culture. And also they were seemingly ahead of everybody else on engaging people at the coalface into decision making about the systems and the tools that we built and what we used. So I was always given great tools. I was always given great access to information, and also because of the culture, which was probably less siloed than other companies I've worked for as well, the data sharing across the silos was really enabled from an early point. And that meant that we got much better insights in supply chains because we have much visibility and transparency to the other things that were going on in the business that were influencing our supply chains. The other place that really surprised me, because I just didn't realize how good they were, is I was so lucky. I actually worked for a Formula One team in the UK. And the first day I arrived, I got given a laptop, and I knew I was in a data-driven place. I didn't even know it was data-driven. When the first thing the IT guy did that delivered my laptop is he said, "Right, I want you to download some data, please." And I went, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, I need to make sure you can get it. You can get it quickly." I was like, "Oh, okay." And so actually I had someone who watched me download a really big data set. And then I watched and realized how important that was, because if you work in a Formula One environment, you'll know that what they're doing is they're going from design to manufacture with their data in 2-week cycles. They're actually taking track data and aerospace performance, aero tunnel performance data, and they're taking that every few days and they're reintegrating that into their designs of all of the components of the car. And that takes a huge world of data and huge data pipes to be able to do it, and also great visualization tools. So actually they were so far advanced, but they didn't even know it. And so that was really incredible. When you walk into that type of environment and you see the volume of data that's moving and you see how well they can see it, it's a really great opportunity. If anyone gets that opportunity, I would really recommend it.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I've just seen how different industries operate, and I guess the priorities of different industries, and you tend to find like companies that operate in automotive, aerospace, even oil and gas to an extent, are incredibly because they're so regulated, and they do rely on a lot of this stuff. I guess a lot more than perhaps some other industries, and they're far more evolved than others, and they don't even realise. Did you? Because obviously you've worked across other industries. Have you seen a significant difference in terms of priorities and like how good they do things?
I think it's often a reflection of, even in the best of companies, sometimes you'll find pockets where, for good reason, and those reasons can be really challenging. It can be, you know, lack of investment, lack of priority, you know, lack of strategic vision around data and how that data can be used to actually add value. I've seen some pockets even in the best of organizations where you still see Excel, which is a fine tool for what it's built for, but it's not a fine tool for housing huge amounts of data or for trying to allow people to work in very complex worlds of information that we're asking people to work in today, you know, to get great insights. And also, I think what I'd say that organizations that have a typical organic structure of how they've grown. So life sciences is a great example of this. So if you go to a lot of life sciences companies, you'll find that a lot of the companies that have been brought together over time have been organically sort of integrated through mergers and acquisitions. And unlike a Unilever kind of paradigm where they basically take those organizations and standardize their ERP systems and standardize a lot of those core supporting platforms as quickly as possible, and therefore develop into common data models as well, the definitions and how we describe things. When we have organizations that are organically grown and they don't have that really strong governance or opinion about how data should look, you get lots and lots and lots of pockets of different views of data. And also you then really struggle as an organization, or what I experienced in my time was really struggling trying to then do what should be simple, which is to do some of the integration activities that allow you to transform whole pieces of your supply chain. If you want to embed, sort of much more internet-driven activity into your supply chain, then you need to have a common and consistent view of what information you're going to need to do that, how good it needs to look, how complete it must be, and how reflective of the real world it has to be. What sort of veracity does that data need? And that's really, really hard when you've got lots and lots and lots of pieces of siloed data. So I'd say I think some organizations that they can actually be leading lights in certain areas, but then other parts of it, because of those types of either the way they've been merged together or because of vision or strategy or cost or focus or priority, they haven't had the opportunity to be focused on. And therefore, their positions are not that strong. Their strength is not there to enable and support the business to actually drive value out of the data that they have, whether that be because they want to transform something to really generate new capability for the business, or whether it's about actually making them more agile so they can be more resilient to the vulnerabilities they're all experiencing right now.
Yeah, yeah. It's important to have that foundation in place. Well, I think when any business is going through some form of transformation, you can't
Definitely.
do that without something in place, and I guess objectives as to where they want to go. Which you'd be surprised by how many organisations do say they want to change, they want to do this, but then I guess the appreciation for what they need to invest in, and areas like this are extremely important for that, regardless of how big your company is.
Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely an important thing. I mean, what would you say are the key challenges behind driving that transformation across data analytics?
I think it's cost and culture. So I think when we think about cost, too often we see these initiatives through a lens of how much is it going to cost us to do it. And that's not surprising, because for a long time in a lot of organizations, supply chains were seen as cost centers. We weren't seen as value drivers. I think that is shifting and has shifted for the real strong players who perform in the master level of supply chains. If you go to P&G, if you go to Unilever, if you go to Nestle, Johnson Johnson, in the different areas they work at, particularly in the FMCG areas they work in, you will hear that their supply chain transformations are not driven predominantly by cost. It's driven by what value add that's going to create, what capability that's going to allow them to do. So they actually see supply chains as a value statement, not as a cost statement. So I think that's the first thing. It's if your organizational mindset is this is about cost, then I actually think many of the results will not transform well, because the focus just isn't in the right place. You're not looking to capitalize on the real reason you're doing it, which is to make yourself more agile, more competitive, more resilient, less vulnerable, and essentially to create capability somewhere in a value chain. You may fundamentally choose to change your supply chain because you may realize that there's either something disrupting it that you want to engage in and you want to get into, or you may realize actually that it's really important from a cost benefit analysis point of view to actually make it far more agile and flexible, to allow parallel supply chain working, to be able to redistribute volumes really quickly across regions. Whatever those things are, those transformations are all built off a realization that it's not about cost, it's about value. So that's the first piece. Then it's culture to me. So as someone who has been beaten by the drum of data quality as much as has beaten the drum, I really think that something that helps people be successful is a bit of a change in mindset around what do we mean by data quality. And also not just a mindset change, but also recognizing the technology change that we can bring that can really enhance how we go forward as companies. And what I mean by that is, how do we bring AI into the world and support the incredible human beings who understand all of that data that needs to work sort of simultaneously together across lots of different environments? How do we help them through technology? But that culture is really important first, though, because I don't know about you, but when someone comes up and says, your data quality, I can nearly finish the sentence with "is bad." Okay, I think I don't know why that quite is, but definitely it is. I think it's because it's always a scoring thing, right? And unless you're at 100%, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a transformation in the culture around the way we talk about data quality. And I think what I would connect that to, or what really works for me when I talk with other people, is about the process of enrichment. Let's understand that actually your data today may not be fit for purpose for the next use case that we really need this business to focus on. So what we should talk about is, instead of sort of taking it from a data quality bad dimension, we talk about what do we need to do to enrich that data. That then puts us in a positive headspace about it as well, because then we can actually talk about the gap, and we can talk about the gap without it being bad and wrong, because it also helps this group articulate why aren't they at that enriched point already? What has been missing from the landscape, either strategically or from a cost, those factors I was talking about earlier. They can then declare those things, and it actually helps the overall change management program that has to happen, because then you can actually allow people with great permission to help explain why they are where they are. You can also then address those blockers for the future. You can make sure those blockers still don't exist, because many a data transformation program has failed because we don't address those underlying things. They just still sit there. And that's really part of that challenge then of culture, of moving it from data quality, I think, to data enrichment. And then when we think about that data enrichment and we've got that cracked, then what we can do is be in a really good safe space to then look at, okay, how do we then look at this with enabling technology? And I think that's one of the really important things that I'm seeing right now as I'm moving forward in what I'm doing is, and I know that sort of the likes of Uber and Amazon, I'm pretty sure it's Nike and a few other organizations, have just published some really great papers on data quality, and how they're using AI to just transform the world and the feeling of data quality, about how we deal with it. And that's really about basically taking these landscapes of data and making sure that if someone is in it and they see something wrong with it, or they see something they don't understand, that they can flag that information. They can flag, hey, in this great big sort of network graph that I'm looking at, I'm seeing some things that are anomalies. I don't understand them, I don't understand why, but I'm going to make sure that someone knows about it. And when we create the right environment that we put people into, and we say, right, you flag something, and what we're going to do is we're going to pick that up. We're not going to force you to raise a long ticket and then to fill in a 54-page document as to why you think that field should be 1,000 instead of 100, and then put it into a process which probably goes offshore to India, into a help desk, which then may come out about 3 months later with the change in data, but it's taking you too much effort. We give technology to that problem, and we allow people to be supported by AI, and we start getting actually a fundamentally transformed data quality process that's actually looking at that continuous stream of information, taking continuous feedback, and actually presenting more smart and intelligent, and of course much broader views of information to say, well, actually, what is the veracity of this data? What is its reflection of the real world? What's its reflection of reality? And giving that back to people so they can really help transform data quality much quicker than I think what we have been up till now. I think we're going to see a pretty big step change in the speed of data quality improvement.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, it's really interesting. I can't imagine they were doing that at Unilever, were they, Rach?
Not when it was taking 45 minutes to basically have my machine warm up. No, but I'm pretty sure they're a fair way down that path by now.
They're doing it now, aren't they?
Yeah.
No, fair enough. Well, just as a kind of headline, really, I mean, what would you say are the key benefits for an organisation that wants to get better at managing this area?
That's a good question. Oh wow! So I think there's a lot. I think there's and I'll start with people, because that's always my focus. Because I honestly believe that people drive the performance of organizations. So when I think about what is coming in the marketplace, what is coming in terms of technology, what is coming in terms of capabilities for businesses, and what do you get when you start applying that and really leveraging your data. You get people who are engaged with the data and they're not frustrated in every day. When they're not frustrated because it's not taking them hours and hours or weeks and weeks to actually get to a really good data insight, that is reliable, okay? And that they don't have to feel worried about, because it could be their career on the line, or it could be a decision that could negatively influence them in some way. What you get is you get a change in performance from those people. And I also believe that people generally around these type of problems are much better than what we enable them to be in terms of their thinking and what they could offer in terms of, do you realize if we fix this problem in our data world, we can actually do this, 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 and this. And so I often think that we get some really creative breakthroughs when we start improving the environment that we give people for data handling. And those benefits can add up to millions and tens of millions. I know in one previous role that we looked at a particular area, and because of new technology and new capabilities, we were able to visualize a problem that was worth tens of millions, that had never been seen before, that had a direct impact on customer service, had a direct impact on people that were using our products. Things like that you don't see until you really recognize you can get rapid benefits through supporting your people to get better insights. I think on top of that, you also get your classic cost benefits, where you will realize that actually you will find a lot less time is spent getting to problems. So your problems last shorter periods of time. So you can basically correct variation that's starting to move in a negative way. You can get situations under control. I can tell you that I'd much rather have some improved inventory positions than some of the inventory write-offs in the millions of pounds that I've had to deal with, because we haven't seen a problem evolving quickly enough. It's actually got to my eyes when I had to 30 or 40 million pounds worth of inventory I didn't need. Whereas if I could have had that removed by having much quicker and well-integrated data and analytics and people looking at it and being able to see that problem, starting to occur, we could have intercepted that much, much, much earlier. All of that inventory is wasted capital, is lost customer service, is wasted capacity, often in factories, particularly in life sciences, where you don't have capacity to spare. You often, if you write off the raw materials of some of these, in life sciences in particular, they're critical raw materials. They're really hard to get a hold of. And actually, sometimes if you waste just a few milliliters of the absolute raw materials and the biologicals, those are products that you may not be able to get again for 18 months. Okay, because of the way we handle some of the batching and because of the exclusivity and really hard work it is to get some of these biologicals to actually work at that level. So there are some really big wins. There are some really big benefits. But at the end of the day, the biggest benefit of all will come through your people, through enablement, and some of those benefits will reach into the tens of millions, if not more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think certainly whenever I speak to someone on this topic, one of the key things they do mention first and foremost is I guess the low-hanging fruit of the cost savings. And then, but there's just so many other areas that long term it could just set the business up for a much better future, really. And I guess it enables them to be able to perform better as their business expands as well, if that's what is happening, really. So
hugely. I think that agility component is really key, because what we've seen with the pandemic and all of the subsequent supply chain shocks is there's that ripple effect that continues coming through. The more that you can leverage a good, solid data platform, the more likely you are to be agile in a successful way. You're not just going to react, you're going to be actually agile. You're actually going to go, oh, hang on, I can see some situation emerging. What are my choices? You can't answer that question if your data environment is not set up for it, if it's not well articulated, if it's not well set up. So I think actually when you think about performance, one of the key statistics I think that was really revealing is that the organizations that lost the most revenue were the ones that also correlated to having the least advanced data strategies. through the pandemic. Okay. Yeah. And that's been because the leaders in data, they've just got ahead of it, right? They've been able to predict where the issues are. They've been able to move into parallel sourcing more quickly. They had far better transparency of their supply chains, which is, I think, is another really key piece of the data environment. It's not just about our data anymore. It's about the supply chains data. It's about supply chain mapping and seeing who are the suppliers in your network. Where is the global concentration of all of your suppliers when you look back down that critical supply chain? Have you got a real issue with some political issue that you don't even know you're about to face? But in this day and age, where we've seen borders shut down, where we have seen, protective measures placed over materials, I think about the USA and paper filters and other things related to vaccines, all of those bigger geopolitical issues have also come to the front. And because we've got these globalized supply chains, if we can't see them, you're not agile enough. You don't know how to respond. You don't know, well, do I need to start calling off another supplier? And of course, in life sciences, when you think about this area in particular, so heavily regulated, but also such emerging technology in terms of in the medical technology space, both the actual manufacturing technologies and also fundamentally the technology of the materials. And they're so sensitive as well, typically in the way they're manufactured, that you don't just call off another one of those overnight. You have to set up, you have to find the right manufacturer, you have to get through the regulatory processes. That process takes time in itself. And of course, that process can also be intensely sped up by good data quality availability throughout your supply chain. And we all saw it demonstrated as well with vaccines. The speed at which we transformed the vaccine supply chain and pulling products through, that in part was enabled because they tore down a lot of the rules on data sharing. They brought a lot more information through that supply chain more quickly, as well as leveraged it with a lot of cash and a lot of technology and a lot of government support. But data and availability of information helped the decision making. And so I think that was another really important piece.
Mm-hmm. Really interesting. Well, I think that's everything I just was keen to cover off on my side, really. But I mean, was there anything else, Rachel, you wanted to highlight?
Oh wow! In terms of data, just how important it can be to a business and how we're going to need it so much more.
Yeah.
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 Well, oh gosh. I think right now the ability to get transparency is probably the most important thought I'd like to leave people with. And I think that's where a lot of challenges are going to face us in the years ahead. So where I see the big next evolution is where organizations, external organizations to industry, are going to want to see more visibility of our supply chains. Because I think what's happened with the pandemic is it's made us realize that the globalization, for cost reasons, of supply chains was a valid process for us to go through for the last 20 or 30 years. Yeah. But actually, there's now questions and concerns that have to be managed for the future, both for prosperity of nation states, for prosperity of individuals. And so I think what's going to be really important to watch out for is look at your organization's strategy around data availability. Look at the strategy around how far down your supply chain, that transparency, can you go today? Look at, have you got the right tools, the right technology to be able to go and do that? Because the way I look forward is that even with the world of blockchain coming at us, because we haven't even talked about blockchain, and that's already starting to emerge in some areas that I'm working on. But if you think about those worlds where we're stepping forward into, they are all about information transformation straight away. It's at a lightning speed, and it creates incredible transparency to the supply chain network. I do believe that regulation and transparency requirements will become more critical, and I believe governments will start asking for more. There's evidence of that already occurring. Germany last month actually put into legislation a law that companies of a certain size actually have to provide, it's now their responsibility to provide supply chain mapping transparency down through their supply chains through multiple tiers. That's new, okay? And in the 100-day report, from the White House back in June. They also stipulated that they are going to push forward towards higher regulation of the pharmaceutical supply chain, and they actually want to see for all drugs, they want to see reporting of the supply chain and transparency of the supply chain all the way through to the API manufacturers. That's a level of transparency that we are not yet used to. And that is a level of transparency that will really challenge not only the people in our businesses, but the technology that they have to use. And if we want to be good, we better be great, and we better have great technology supporting those people. So I think that's where we're heading. I think the world of data is just going to get bigger and bigger. We need to get better and better because we have to keep on building broader and broader transparency of our supply chain networks in order to improve the value that we keep on delivering as supply chain professionals. So I think that's where we go.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And here's an interesting point that could probably be a whole other podcast for you. Do you think that visibility and those initiatives you just mentioned there are in some way related to the increase in environmental concerns at the corporate level, so corporate social responsibility, sustainability?
Absolutely. Yeah, and you could definitely unpack that, but without unpacking it too much, I would hugely agree with you. I think there's a level of responsibility of the corporate, but also more than that. There are levels beyond now where we have to make sure that we can see ultimately when we source raw materials, are they coming through sustainable practice? I think with the climate change agenda, I think we're going to see more and more focus on our carbon footprint, but there will be other footprints that I'm certain we'll start seeing with the climate agenda. We also need better transparency because we may start have to reporting on our sort of CO2 footprint or other footprints all the way down through our supply chain. Are you ready? Is your organization ready to say, actually, hang on, let's look down through all of our suppliers. Have they got not just the good practice in terms of human labor and workforce, but actually have they got the good practice in places, and can we see who they are so that we can say, actually, yeah, they're actually complying as well to our climate initiatives and our climate strategies and the commitments we may have made as a large scale organization to climate. So I think you could definitely unpack that. That's a really great next thing to talk about. And there's plenty there. And there's also some really novel and exciting stuff. Again, Unilever got ahead of this a bit. They've already bought into satellites, and they're already doing a whole bunch of stuff on palm oil and actually making sure that the palm oil plantations around the world are not expanding where they shouldn't be into really protected rainforests. But that's a whole other thing to unpack.
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, well. Fantastic. Well, this has been really interesting to unpack with you. I hope that provided some interesting insights, perhaps a different perspective, or validated what your current supply chain department is doing. If you have any questions, would like some more information, or discuss another topic you're passionate about, then please feel free to contact me directly at the email address provided at the beginning of the paper, and we can arrange a time to speak. Thank you very much for your time. Talk soon.